All right, we have lots to talk about, and we are keeping it in the trenches for this video. I want to keep it in the trenches, but first, the Detroit Lions are doing something, and they get a surprise that no one saw coming, and that is that they are actually working with the NFL. It seems like that never happens with the Detroit Lions. The NFL actually came to the Detroit Lions, kind of the NFL. I'll explain here in just a moment, and then we are going to get into what we are hearing about new defensive tackle, nose tackle, whatever you want to call him, Roy Lopez, and some of his stuff, and then we are going to also talk about a crazy offensive line shift up. All this happening after the Tigers win in walk-off fashion. Who watched the game? All right, if you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch it. I got to tell you, it is so nice to see number 1 overall pick Spencer Torkelson actually start living up to it. Like, that's what I love to see. So anyways, it has been a blast watching the Tigers. When you go 0-3, you go to LA, you play the Dodgers, you go 0-3, and then boom, just like that, you're 5-4. That is really, really impressive. A lot of teams are going to get swept by the Dodgers, especially early on in the year while they stay healthy. And it is awesome seeing what the Tigers are doing. So make sure you stay attuned to all the Tigers and what they got going on. But we are here to talk about Detroit Lions football, and let's talk about what the NFL is asking the Detroit Lions to do. It all started last year in the playoffs as we were going into the game against Minnesota Vikings, and St. Brown said, I think the rules should be changed. She talked about how it's crazy. The thought that a 14-win team would have to go on the road is kind of crazy, but I guess I don't make the rules. But then, an NFL executive, VP of football operations, Troy Vincent, took notice. All right, and he reached out to Detroit Lions president Rod Wood, and he said this. Rod Wood, this is him talking. Troy Vincent from the league reached out to me and said, I tend to agree with St. Brown. Wood said this week at the league meetings, would you mind partnering with us to make a proposal on that? So we made the proposal. In other words, what happens is that the NFL, instead of having some crazy thing where I remember last year at this time, like when the NFL schedule came out and we're like, we have 5 Thursdays, like, or whatever it was, like, and schedules come out there, like the Detroit Lions just got screwed by the NFL again. Well, this time the Lions are in cahoots with the NFL. So it is something that I don't think any of us saw coming. Now what I want to do is I want to do a couple of other things in this video. Just kind of want to chat about it. First, I want to talk about the excitement that I have for very simple, plain guys like Roy Lopez. I absolutely love what he brings to the table for this Detroit Lions team. And I want to talk about our defensive tackle depth. And then I want to go on to the offensive side because we are hearing a complete shift on the offensive line as well. So let's talk about this real quick. First, I want to hear what Dan Campbell had to say against or about Roy Lopez. And here's what he had to say. He said he's a down and dirty player. Doesn't mean he can't play third down, but he lives in base a lot. He's taking on the double teams. He's keeping people off the backers, Campbell said of Lopez. He can get an edge on you, and he'll just do it time in, time out, time in, time out again, over and over. One of the things that impressed me about him was when we played him. Him going against Frank all day, we ran the heck out of the ball, and he held his own. All right, we want to be able to stop the run. I think people don't realize how important defensive tackles are to eat up double teams so that the linebackers can run free. Unbelievable. To get a guy who can do that consistently for $4 million, even better. So him, DJ Reader, if he continues to play well, you end up letting Reader go. You can keep having Roy Lopez on your team. You sign him for a longer deal. He's 27 years old. And you just keep him. Those are the kind of moves. That's the kind of chess that you have to play. So Roy Lopez is never going to be as much as DJ Reader. He's never going to be a $20 million a year defensive tackle. But he can absolutely clog up the run Not as well, but almost as well. But if he ends up being a $5-6 million a year defensive tackle, fantastic. Then we save a ton of money when DJ Reader comes off the books, and we still have a guy who's doing the right thing. Now, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell when we look at the other side. So what I want to do here is I want to do a little quick mock draft for you, only in the first few rounds, and kind of show you some things that we can tweak and mess around with. And I want to switch over to the offensive side. But before I do that, I just want to remind you of our depth chart. All right, I want to look at this real quick, and I want to remind everybody that you have DJ Reader. No, Aleem McNeil will not be back yet. He won't be. So it's Reader and Onwuzurike. Reader, Lopez. Lopez, Onwuzurike. And then you've got Mekhi Wingo and you have Pat O'Connor that are going to be back as well. There is some decent depth when you're looking at when you're looking at the defensive tackle room. Where there's not a ton of depth is on the offensive interior. You have Frank. And then what? You have Graham Glasgow. And I think a lot of people are wondering, is Graham still the guy? Like, is he the guy we saw 2 years ago? Or is he a 32-year-old aging guard that last year was just the beginning of a continued deterioration? Do the Lions want to continue with Graham Glasgow? You know, I've said really from the beginning, don't re-sign Zeitler, move Graham back to right. Maybe the problem is that he was at left and he's been known to play right and or center because he has that great versatility, which is very valuable to the Detroit Lions. Center is something they run a lot out of. They believe the three core positions on the offensive line are right tackle, left tackle, and center. Right tackle, left tackle, and center. That's what they want. That's what they want to see. So when I look at that kind of thing, you know, like that is what is important. That's why they like him. But who knows? Maybe Graham Glasgow has entered a stage in his career where he's just a backup and you need to start or you need to find two new starters. Christian Mahogany could be one of them. Brad Holmes, one of them. Brad Holmes was asked about this. He said it's a small sample size of the starts that he played. They were promising. They were encouraging. We do feel like he has starter level ability, but he is still a young player, so we need to make sure he has competition. I should have showed you guys that quote. There you go. All right, there it is. But that's not all we're talking about. We don't want to just hear from Brad Holmes. We're also talking about, you know, Graham Glasgow, and we talked about it. I talked about the move into right, and then you put Christian Mahogany at left guard. Is right guard just an easier position to play in this offense? I don't know. Dan Campbell thought about him moving back to right guard, and Dan Campbell did what he always does. He answered it straight. He said, I don't know. That's a thought, man. We've talked about that. Do you go back to right, and is it Mahogany left? Is it somebody we drafted? Campbell said, you know, we're going to do our best and let these guys compete and see where they're at. Then check this one out. Another developing thing. Do we try Manu at guard? Giovanni Manu. That's a thought, Campbell said. So we're going to try to let these guys compete a little bit and move them around and see what's right and see where we're at. But you know, it's not going to be set in stone. Whoa. All right. You're going to kind of take a leap of faith, push those reps, and see if you can grow from them on Giovanni Manu. He goes, do you do that or do you keep him on the outside? So if he is a guy that you keep on the outside, which my hope is that he is, I want to be clear on that. Great. He's a guy that you keep on the outside. But what if he isn't? All right? What if he's not? Then you need to get a guy to play the interior. And that is why I want to sit here and tell you with the depth that we have at the defensive interior. Now, not a ton of young depth. So I still think a guy like Walter Nolan, a guy like Derek Harmon, a guy like Darius Alexander, I think these are all very obvious solutions. Darius Alexander would be an awesome fit, probably upgrade to Levi Onwuzurike. That would be awesome. But for the sake of the conversation we're having right now, what if we go Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State? He was a tackle there. A lot of people believe he's going to play guard. He's 313 pounds. He's 6'6". Here's what I'm impressed by. When you look at his RAS. No, he didn't do the 40. He didn't do all that kind of stuff, but he has great explosion, elite explosion, and he has enough strength. This is at the tackle position. If you put him at guard, it's even more impressive. So what I'm thinking is, what does it look like in the draft? And let's just see what it sets us up for in the future. Now, I just want to be really clear. If the board fell to us like this, I want to make it clear. It's opposite of the purpose of this exercise. But if James Pierce Jr. falls to us, the Detroit Lions, I want to draft him at the edge position. I would want to draft him. But for the purpose of this, we're going to draft Gray Zabel, and we're going to see what it looks like when we come into the next one. All right? Because there is still the opportunity to get some guys even in this different spot. So let's go to the second round here. What you don't see are guards. In fact, there's a large split. If you don't get a guard in the first round, I would be looking third round, fourth round, fifth round. That's where a lot of the other guards are, but there are players of other positions that are impressive. All right, let's look at this. All right, you get a guy that is 6'3", 315 pounds. All right, a lot more potential than his stats say. That's not a bad second-round pick. All right, that is not a bad second-round pick here, and pick 28 of the second round. All right, you look at other guys. You look at Josiah Stewart. All right, is he a little bit older? A little bit, yeah. He's 21.9, though. He's still young. This is a guy who put together all the same type of numbers as Pierce. So now you're sitting here in the second round and you're saying, but we need an edge rusher. Well, there he is. What about Kyle Kennard? All right, you want to go with an edge rusher like that? Go for it. Kyle Kennard. Jared Ivey out of Ole Miss. Let's look at this guy. You want that big set-the-edge edge rusher? You go for him. So you tell me right now. You tell me, what do you want at the edge position? And I'm telling you, in the second round, it's still there. It's still there. And this is becoming the longest one I've done. So if you want that kind of quick edge rusher, rush the passer, it's Kennard or it's Josiah Stewart. Personally, I think the Lions want a guy that's bigger, that can set the edge and get enough pressure when he needs to. Jared Ivey, draft him. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, if you go guard right away, it's not a problem. And here's the beautiful thing. When you get back into the third round, you want to keep going and stacking the interior of that offensive line, go for it. Tate Rutledge. Go for it. Jared Wilson. You want to draft the eventual replacement for Frank Ragnow? Go for it. Go for it. Why not? There are players here. The more and more I look at this draft, the more and more I think the sweet spot for that edge rusher is the second round. The more I look at it, the more I think the sweet spot is the edge rusher, that pick number 60. That pick number 60 that we have. And if you can get a guy like Ivy, if you can get one of those guys, you are in a very, very good spot. All right. Thanks so much for watching. This ended up being a really long video. Hey, go Lions, go Tigers. Man, that's been fun to watch so far this year. Go Pistons, locking up the 6th seed. Love it. I just want to watch meaningful playoff basketball for the Pistons. Isn't that what you want? I don't need them to win the first round. I just want them to play like a good 6-7 game series in the first round. I do want them to win the first round. But right now, I just want Cade to get healthy. So we used to cover the Pistons on this channel. Maybe we should bring it back. Who knows? All right, thanks for watching. See you on the next one.